Hey, welcome, one and all, to yet another episode of Whick TV, and we are joined by some wonderful guests today. We have Brianna Wu, SocDoneLeft, and Hassan Piker is with us today too. No, that's a joke. That's a joke. Noahpinion will be here shortly. He's getting a package before the anarchists take him to task. His words, not mine. But I know we're a little late, right? And I want to make sure I start on time. We're going to be talking about a number of different topics today, including leftism, Israel and Palestine. We're going to be talking about TikTokers for 𝕵𝖎𝖏. We're going to be talking about the DSA's ad with a watermelon attacking a black
Oh my
representative.
God.
We're going to
Oh
be
my God.
talking about the protest in front of the DNC as well.
Can we have something good for the left to talk about? Can we, like,
Yes, we
anything
do.
good? Good. What is that?
Actually, we're going to be talking about there is some evidence, right, that Israel is more amenable to a ceasefire, and we're
Oh,
going to be
thank
discussing
goodness.
that as well. But first of all, I want to give everyone here a chance to just briefly introduce themselves, tell you who you are, and then we'll just get into it. Sound good, gang?
Works for me.
Cool. Brianna, why don't you start us off?
My name is Brianna Wu. I am Executive Director of Rebellion PAC. I also do special operations for Progressive Victory. Real life Politico, trying to bridge the gap between kind of online activism and real world results, and I very bravely today will take the position that 𝕵𝖏𝖏 is bad, actually.
Stunning and brave. We'll talk about that as we go. SocDoneLeft, what's your position on Osama bin Laden? You're muted, friend.
Not a fan. I am SocDoneLeft or Aiden. You can find me at SocDoneLeft.org/live. Socialist. I also try and get people involved in real life activism, primarily through the Democratic Socialists of America. And just wanted to say that that toll has reached like 12,000. I do think it's important to try and stand opposed to ethnic cleansing or mass slaughter or indiscriminate slaughter of civilians, and I do worry that that's what's happening, even as we also condemn bad elements of our cause.
Beautiful. Well, thanks for being here. We'll get into it as we go. First time guest on my show, Noah Smith. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I'm here because I inadvisably started blogging about geopolitics a whole bunch. It's not my area of expertise, but I guess it's just what everyone wanted to yell about, and so it's sort of when the music is playing, you got to get up and dance, I suppose. And if I don't say stuff, then someone much more horrible than me will be heard disproportionately more. So even though I'm ignorant, I have a moral obligation because of people even more ignorant than me. So anyway, that said, I had a couple blog posts after the Israel war started, like one about how Pax Americana is basically done. That's put a fork in that. How this episode sort of reveals how Western leftists in general have allowed themselves to be taken over by just dumb butt anti-Americanism that just has sort of absorbed every other ideology that they might have. And then just a couple other things, but it was mostly just sort of iterations on those. No one wants to hear my thoughts about like actual Israel.
I hope I can say, Noah, just before we get started, I am a really big fan of your work. I have been for a long time. As someone on the left who is very, very policy focused, I appreciate your work because you're always coming at it from a policy first perspective. How can we get good outcomes? So it's really, really good leftist analysis, but it's very, very much rooted in a pragmatic, non-academic, non-utopian, how can we actually get there? I've subscribed to your work for a long time. I think other people should too. It's the best $100 I spend a year. It's a professional honor to be here with you today.
Cool.
Thanks. I don't deserve that. But
how do you follow that?
True.
I don't know.
It's true. It's good stuff.
Fair enough.
I don't know if I can live up to expectations.
Well, we'll find out. The first topic I wanted to talk about tonight is Thank you for the $5, 𝕵𝖎𝖏. I'm not going to read that out loud quite yet. We will get to the super chats. Don't worry, gang. And if you have questions for any of these individuals as we go, feel free to send me some money, and I'll read out your questions or comments as we go. But first of all, we're going to be talking about something that I just stumbled onto yesterday, and that is the trend for a lot of young Gen Zers to be putting out TikToks of them reading Osama bin Laden's letter to America. I'm not sure if all of you are aware of this, but this has gone this has gone viral. The Guardian, who again they were using to read that letter, took the letter off because it was going so viral. But a lot of these young people read the letter to America and then talk about how it changed them and how, maybe Osama bin Laden wasn't so bad actually, and he had a lot of things right. And there's a lot of that going on. So I guess the question for the group is, has the cons of TikTok outweighed the pros at this point? Should we be looking at seriously banning this platform from our lexicon? What do we think? You're shaking your head and laughing. SocDoneLeft, go ahead.
Well, I'm laughing because like the other platforms available are Facebook, which actively does aided in the genocide in Myanmar. Twitter, whose leader has endorsed the view that Jewish financiers are bringing in non-whites to support anti-white sympathies, and TikTok, where misinformation, runs rampant. It's just like social media needs a fundamental rethinking. It's not TikTok or Twitter or whatever. That's a unique problem, is my view. The problem is like all algorithm-driven social media.
I don't disagree with that. I do think something unique is going on here. Before I get to that, I just want to take a step back. I think it's worth examining why is this particular letter going really viral. And I think it's really worth noting we never had an honest conversation with America after 9/11 about why we were attacked. I lived through that era. I was a very young staffer in that era. And it really got summed up as, Bush coming out and saying they hate us for our freedoms. They're terrorists, they're hateful, they're evil. And the truth is, it was a little bit more complicated than that. And I think this is really kind of the structural failure of the news media in that era to have a more sophisticated conversation with the American people. This also happened, I think, in holding Bush accountable for the disastrous Iraq War, which got many of my friends killed, right? We never had an honest conversation as a country about weapons of mass destruction or the true cost of the war. So I'm not surprised that young people are looking at this and going, wow, why don't I know this? I think that's an indictment of the news media. At the same time, SDL, I really don't agree with you saying they're all bad, therefore this is not a big deal. I think you're really foolish if you don't recognize that ByteDance is essentially the PRC. And the PRC having such a huge say in the information space for an entire generation of young Americans is something we can take seriously. I have criticized Facebook and Twitter and all these places for years. You can go listen to my show Rocket. I've been dead consistent on that. But it is that much more terrifying when a hostile foreign power can do it. So I do think that we need aggressive regulation, and maybe this threat coming from China will wake Congress up.
Any opinions, Noah, or is it no opinion?
No, I mean, I've been writing a little bit about this actually. I think that it is not good to have one of our major news sources. I would call them news networks at this point. One of our major news networks controlled by the People's Republic of China. That's dumb. During Cold War I, we wouldn't have allowed CNN to be controlled by the Soviet Union. That we just wouldn't have done that. And so I think it makes sense to force TikTok to sell, or ByteDance to sell TikTok to an American company, which will then not take marching orders from the PRC in the event of an emergency. For example, if China invades Taiwan, it's incredibly obvious to everyone involved that they will pressure TikTok to push pro-China messaging as a way to blunt the American response to that. And so we know that's going to happen. We can prevent that from happening now. There's also the privacy angle. There's the fact that a foreign government is collecting detailed video information on all of our kids in the whole country. Also Zoom now. The PRC now has video recording of you having cyber sex. For those of you who do that.
Wait, what?
Well, that's why you don't use Zoom for that. Come on.
Yeah, if you're halfway smart, now think about how many people are. Anyway, yes. So the point is that it is. I don't trust tech corporations, but I trust the PRC a hell of a lot less than I trust tech corporations. Right? I would absolutely rather have Mark Zuckerberg running stuff than Xi Jinping. No question about it. Put on your silly shorts and wave a flag and go wakeboarding. I would much rather have that guy than Xi Jinping, controlling my information diet, especially for a number of reasons. First of all, he's not as bad. I mean, Xi Jinping is just much worse than Mark Zuckerberg. And also, Xi Jinping is going to and his regime are going to more actively intervene. Right? Mark Zuckerberg usually not going to intervene. In fact, when you've seen Facebook do bad stuff, it's usually not intervening. People were, people in Myanmar, which you mentioned, right? Like there were genocidaires who were using this to coordinate, right? Instead of what they normally use, which is like radio or something. And then Facebook didn't intervene to stop them, and it was a sin of omission. Well, that's bad, but at least they're not actively intervening to promote the bad thing, which I think that the CCP definitely does and will do. So yeah, I'm totally Brianna on this one.
Do you think that's happening now with the Osama bin Laden letter? Do you think the PRC is pushing that, or do you think it's just more of a result of?
They censored it.
Okay.
The PRC censored it, or ByteDance censored it. Let's say, which probably came from something.
Yeah, like the CPC has been really active in promoting war on terror rhetoric. Actually, the entirety of their justification for the mass internment of hundreds of thousands of people in Xinjiang is these are terrorists. We got to incarcerate them. Let's do what the war on terror was. America did it right. Let's do it here, more or less. So yeah, they're not going to be actually TikTokers should get based and Osama bin Laden pilled. No,
right.
I don't think.
No, but also there's no strategic benefit to the CCP. Or having, or Xi Jinping for having having bin Laden be rehabilitated. That does nothing for them. It just makes them look it just makes them and their network look like idiots, right? So it's like Fox News, if they'll try to be respectable, when they don't have an agenda to push, on something, and then when they have an agenda to push, they'll push that using the attempts at respectability from other times to give them a gloss of respectability. And so it's obvious game, You or I could easily do this if we were in charge of this company. It wouldn't be very difficult to say, okay, we're banning bin Laden. Look how responsible we are. And then when it comes time to invade Taiwan, we're actually, we're not invading Taiwan. It's already part of us. You can't invade yourself. A country can't invade itself. And that's the message that's going to be going out on the day of the invasion. And you know it and I know it. We all know this is what's going to happen.
I mean, so I think this is a very reasonable concern about any ownership of any platform that has a clear ideological bent. It's the reason I brought up Elon Musk and Twitter is that he pretty clearly has an ideological bent. The minute that he got into power, he unbanned every white nationalist on the platform. Without exaggerating, you get on the list of the people he unbanned the first week, it's literally white nationalists, white nationalists, white nationalists, white nationalists. And so I'm not trying to say that the CPC is a good owner. I'm trying to say that I don't know that there's a good owner that I would trust any social media platform to control. Mark Zuckerberg is quote unquote better, mostly because he seems to be a semi-apolitical, median American who is very, I don't know, loves to grill and loves to spend time with his kids and not be an insane partisan hack on Twitter or whatever. And so I don't know. I don't know if you can get a person in charge of a platform that's like that. I don't think that you can just hand off to TikTok to the U.S. government or a U.S. company and not have similar problems.
But given that there is
what you have to think about.
Go ahead if you want.
You have to think about national interest here. You have to think that a foreign government is different than a private American individual, whether it's Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg or anyone. Foreign governments are special and different, right? There's something different about those where it's scarier to have a foreign government in control of an American media source than it is to have Elon Musk or any private individual, no matter how evil. Because or governments
I guess,
inherently more powerful than people.
Actually, can I just add into that super quickly? I think one of my big criticisms, and I completely agree with you, Noah, is I think we now have two generations of Americans that have largely taken national security for granted, right? Yet we need to have policies like we have radiation detectors when you come into this country to see if you're smuggling a dirty bomb, not because that has ever happened before in the past, but because it could happen and we need to have those defenses, right? So with the PRC, I can't point to you with some concrete data that says they pumped up the algorithm today to make this story, go viral. I can't point to you for information about that, but this concern is very real. And I really think you're underselling how information warfare works. This is the way it works. And there's a fantastic book out there by Richard Stengel. It's called Information Warfare. He's the undersecretary under John Kerry and former editor of Time. It's fantastic. He talks about how information warfare, when it's done correctly, it exacerbates existing divisions in society and basically sets them on fire. And a trend I see in the left that is getting worse and worse and worse is what Noah talked about at the beginning of this show, which is this kind of simplistic America equals bad thinking that is just epidemic with younger people. Like they don't believe in democracy, they don't believe in electoralism. Let me finish. It's just ultra cynical. So I think that this is a unique threat. At the end of the day, I don't think Mark Zuckerberg is a good guy, and I want this space aggressively. I want us to take a more aggressive hand in our information space. But I agree with Noah that there's a difference in threat between the PRC and a billionaire that is mostly just chasing money.
Yeah, I mean, so I think that there is a difference between a purely profit-focused, algorithm-driven media. The argument I've long given is that I think these things should be, as much as possible, like collectively, democratically owned, that the people of America should own them. And as much as that leads to its own problems, if you have some sort of collective, directly elected leadership, I trust that more than any Elon Musk, any Mark Zuckerberg, any Chinese Communist Party, whatever. Right. And that's not in the cards. So the options are it's a pro-profit billionaire, or it's a pro-profit billionaire who also loves apartheid, or it's a pro-profit billionaire who loves China. Those are sort of the options that we have. And so it'd be nice to have the quote unquote apolitical pro-profit billionaire. I did want to note on the young people are all anti-America and anti-election. I'm pretty sure that the anti-election idea mostly comes from polls from the Washington Post, which rates things as, unless you gave very strong or 10 out of 10 support for democracy, you're rated as not believing in democracy. But that average support on a 1 to 10 scale for democracy has remained roughly constant over the past 50 years. So I think Noah's nodding, but my understanding is that there hasn't been a huge decline. It's real, but a 2% decline.
Right, exactly. And yes, you're right.
So I would wonder, and I don't have any data at my fingertips to back this up. This is just a supposition, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. But it seems to be that, at least from what I'm seeing, and maybe this is the algorithm, young people trust institutions less than they have before. But I think this is across the board as well. And so we are seeing, in the information war, right, that is going on right now with Israel and Palestine, Israel's losing that war. I think we can all agree to that, right? Israel is losing the
Oh, absolutely.
War, especially with the younger viewers, right? And so why is this happening? Why is Hamas so successful in their appealing to people like Hassan Piker, right? What is going on? What do you guys think?
I mean, so I did.
Hassan Piker is obviously a different audience than your average young person. I mean, he's a social media shouter who plays to an audience both foreign and domestic, which wants to hear a certain point of view. So that's like saying, playing to Tucker Carlson or something. It's not representative.
Yeah, but they do have outsized influence, do they not? Right?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
I just want to note, it's not just they've won the hearts and minds of the big posters or whatever. That The Economist a few weeks ago posted this graph of social media posts which are pro-Palestine versus pro-Israeli over time, and the pro-Palestinian posts basically started as frequent as pro-Israeli posts, and then nowadays, at least by what was this, October 19th, they were 4 times as common. So it's not just like, oh, the big ones are doing it. It's like everyone that's posting is way more pro-Palestinian than pro-Israeli. So whether that's because they like won over the big posters or whatever, I can't say. I'm just trying to say it's way beyond like the big head honchos have been taken over. It's widespread.
I think there's been a growing, I mean, let's not pretend this started on October 7th. There has been, I think generally speaking, over the last 15 years, a larger and larger conversation in the left and in American politics generally, questioning the foreign policy actions of Israel, right? I think it was really, really verboten to even question this stuff 15 years ago. I think it is, I think it's much more mainstream, not just in the Democratic Party, but I think your average like Jewish person that votes for the Democrats is more and more suspicious that Israel's foreign policy is actually making Israel secure. I think that is like an organically larger conversation, and I think that's actually a positive trend, because I think like a failure of larger news media is to, I think it's been basically, I don't want to say censored, but discouraged, right? So I support that. I think one of the things that's making it so hard to have an adult conversation in this is I do think that you have now 2 generations of Americans that their foreign policy analysis all too often devolves to America bad. And I want to be really clear. When I was a young 20-something and I discovered leftism, I started reading Noam Chomsky. I read a book called Hegemony or Survival. And it was stuff I'd never heard before. And what made me really radical for a long time. I think the difference is with social media, it means that level of, I don't want to say reactionary, but that kind of energetic, youthful analysis of the world, it just has more and more of a disproportionate impact, right? Like in many ways, a sock puppet has the same ability to influence the conversation as like a journalist that actually studies this stuff. So I think it adds to this increasing destability we've seen in the information space and really makes it hard to have a good conversation.
I guess something I would note on like anti-Americanism or whatever is something from internal DSA politics. So DSA, largest socialist orgs, it makes up maybe 70-80% of organized leftists, just like as a bellwether. At the convention that we held in August, 3 of the 5 like major factions of DSA put forward and voted for a resolution which supports something called class-based internationalism, which in short meant support workers everywhere, including notably by name in Ukraine, for example. So I guess I would just try and say, like, I do think that anti-America-ism or whatever is a real thing, and it's a really bad thing. At the same time, I would actually unironically argue that the left nowadays probably has less of that than any time since like 1917, which might sound odd, but like if you think back to the left orgs in like the 1970s, they were all Maoists, like not exaggerating. They were all literal Maoists, literal like Soviet apologists. They were way more America bad than the modern US left is. So I just, by historical trends, you're living in the best period ever for the left, if your concern is being too anti-America.
That is not reassuring. That is accurate, but it is not reassuring.
I guess I would just try and say that like the majority of people in groups like DSA are not like, there is a lot of hate for America, but I think that it's hate because they see America as like a capitalist world hegemon, which like kind of, yeah. It's just that a lot of people also temper it with like the other hegemons are Russia, another capitalist hegemon, and China, a capitalist hegemon in red, for us anyway. So I guess I would just say, I think it's a real problem, and I've tried to critique it over and over and over again. The word I use is campism for people who, this is what they used back in the Cold War. You either fall in the US camp, a lot of unions did, or you fall in the Soviet camp, basically all the tiny left orgs did. And so like the old Trotskyist line, and I'm not a Trotskyist, but the old Trotskyist line was third camp, neither Moscow nor Washington. And I think that that's unironically where a lot of people are leaning towards in organized socialist movements. I can't speak to like TikTok or whatever. I can't poll TikTokers, but among people who are in a movement, they tend to lean towards third camp. That's my view.
Watch out for ice picks. Watch out for tankies with ice picks, SDL.
I'm worried.
I really have to say, SDL, like, I respect you, but I think there's a real tendency in your thinking here. Like, it's like you're just minimizing right and left. And I don't have like a hard thing I can show you right now, like a number I can show you. But I can say anecdotally, like my anecdata for you today is I've been in this game for quite a while, right? I worked the 2004 election, 2008, 2012, 2016, 2020, and then working 2024 now. I see this issue getting worse every single cycle, and it's gotten markedly worse in the last 8 years. And I hear what you're saying, but I think this is something you need an answer for. I really do. Like, it's good that you can come here and say you don't think that, talking like this knee-jerk anti-Americanism is good, but I do think that, all too often the DSA in, Democratic politics, it's not a force for constructing things, right? If you look here in Massachusetts, y'all just threw out one of the very strongest members that you have because they decided to go work with our Democratic governor, 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜, right? You threw him out. This is someone working for rent control in Massachusetts, literally the most progressive person we have. There's an increasing extremism that is happening in leftist politics, and I think we need to address it.
I totally agree with you. I was actually trying to speak to that. I believe that's Worcester County, right? Or am I wrong about which?
It's Worcester.
Okay, unpronounceable like English name county. They're one of the like most quote unquote anti-electoral DSA chapters. I'm pretty sure that they like actively renounced like working with the Democratic Party. Period. I believe they might be the one that's trying to like form a workers cooperative as like a form of the DSA. So I'm trying to point out that like
I don't think that's the chapter, but please go on.
More broadly, I would just note that like successful left movements in the US, like part of the reason DSA was successful is it rode the coattails of Bernie, it rode the coattails of AOC, and the biggest chapters are similarly reflective of that. Like the biggest chapter in America is New York City, about I think 8,000 members nowadays. And that one runs on winning elections and trying to win policy. And so I feel like this is going to come off as I'm minimizing it. I'm just trying to say that like we're unpronounceable name and a lot of Washington are not great. At the same time, I do think that the overwhelming majority do not fit that trend. And one last note on this, I do actually think it's worth calling out, and I spend a lot of time calling it out. Like if you go on my Twitter, easily like 1 in 10 posts are critiquing like dumb leftists for being pro-Stalin or pro-Russia or whatever. Like I completely agree that it's worth calling out.
First of all, thank you for the raid, Sansel. Appreciate it. Kick back, pick up your feet. We're talking about electoralism right now, apparently, because I do want to ask, like, all this that's going on, right? We see a increase in animosity. I don't know if you all saw the DNC protest last night, where you had a lot of ceasefire protesters go on, and it became a mess, right? There does seem to be this increase in animosity towards Democrats from the extreme left, right? And we'll get to the right in a minute. I want to talk about them later. But for now, right? Do we think that's going to substantively impact the elections going forward? I guess I'll just ask you bluntly, and I'm curious what Noah thinks first, and then we'll go around. Do you think Biden is in trouble here because of all this?
It's hard to say. I mean, I think that we could see Biden's poll numbers not doing particularly great before the Israel war. We could see concerns about his age, which are real and legitimate. We could see concerns about the economy, which I think are primarily just like a delay, right? It's like the economy's gotten better since summer 2022, but like inflation's down, wages are up, and all this stuff, right? And the job market's still great, but people haven't really recognized that yet. And I think they're starting to. You're starting to see those numbers creep up, and so you'll see more optimism by next year. But so I think that we're already starting to see a couple of things weigh on Biden's poll numbers. I don't know how this Israel thing will affect Biden's polling. My guess is just not much.
Okay.
Because Biden's done, sort of the middle of the road thing, which is to criticize excessive Israeli brutality while overall saying I stand with Israel, which if you look at it is what the median voter wants pretty clearly. Obviously, the people on the right are never going to like Biden no matter what. He could do anything, you know. He could just throw chocolate at them out of a T-shirt cannon, and they would be like, you know, look at this horrible handout that people are getting. But then, you know, but and then in terms of leftists, I don't know how, you know, people. I don't know if people in the DSA are going to say, I just can't bring myself to vote for Biden. He condoned genocide and blah blah blah. I don't know how many of those people there's going to be.
I would just point to the election numbers on the 11th, where Dems did overwhelmingly, like they did fine in basically every election that I saw. Like they did, like in Mississippi, for example, a pretty red state. They did exactly as well this election as they did the last one. Andy Beshear did 4.5 points better this election than he did last time. Ohio, like 55-60% support for weed and abortion. And it wasn't just like a little abortion ban, abortion, like constitutional protection. It was support for a complete abortion protection and complete reproductive rights protection. So I would just say that, like, so far, if there's been an election backlash, we have not seen it.
Yeah, I hear you on that. I want to just jump back and give a correction. You tried to minimize my point by saying this happened in Worcester.
Yeah, I was wrong.
In Worcester, Mass, and this happened in Cambridge. I don't know if you know Massachusetts very well. Cambridge is probably one of the most important parts of Boston. It's where all of our biotech companies are. It's where the Moderna vaccine was developed. It's where Harvard is. It's where MIT is. So this is literally the heart of Boston, with some of the most important people, the most well-connected people, and they expelled their biggest success story for working with their governor. So I do think this is a serious issue, and I do think you should take it seriously. Coming back to the Biden thing, you know, I really feel like there's this tendency to treat the election that we just had as kind of a panacea. There's something about Democrats that, you know, we tend to want to believe, and I think this is true for all of human nature. We want to believe any poll that like confirms what we want to believe, which is why Democrats didn't want to believe the polls that, you know, showing Trump was in striking distance of Hillary. I think it's really hard to draw. Like, I looked really deeply into all of these elections because it's my job. I think it's really, really hard to draw strong conclusions about what these elections will mean for the general. Simply because it's true that generic Democrats do have, in general, a really big lead over Republicans in many parts of the country. That's not true when it's a brand and it's a person that they actually know. And I actually think really strong evidence for this is Joe Manchin's announcing he's not going to run again in West Virginia. He's not doing this because he wants to drive off in his Maserati and enjoy like time on the boat. He's doing this because he has a very sophisticated polling operation. He's seeing that Biden is weak. He's seeing that Trump is weak. He sees that there's a lane open for a third party to come in and capture this. He's doing it for his own political power. So my really strong suggestion for the Democratic Party is we've got to level up our messaging and our connection with voters. Just one more thing really quickly, Whick, because coming back to the DNC near riot that we saw, I think this is a really direct result of a party that has kind of kept our head in the sand and decided to kind of let this whole thing with Israel and Hamas blow over, so AIPAC doesn't come and target you electorally. And I think that's not working. Biden's biggest weakness, in my view, since you asked how, Whick, isn't any of his policies. I think they've been excellent. Is that the first most important job of the president is to be a communicator for the values of the party. I didn't like how Trump did it, but he sure did it. Obama was excellent at it. You know, Ronald Reagan was excellent at it. So right now, I think because Biden is so weak on television and so weak at being able to provide a message that connects with Americans, I think it means we need to get other people in the party to stand up and do that for him. He needs more surrogates. We need to be more active out there. And this comes back to my mission in my career, which is to get mainstream Democrats on shows exactly like this one to make the case to younger people here.
Okay, younger people that are watching, right? Just pay attention because I'm going to ask Noah and SocDoneLeft the same question, right? Democrats do seem to have a messaging problem right now. How do they fix it? What do they do? How does Biden better? Because Noah, you mentioned, and I've read wrote about this a lot, that the economy is actually doing pretty robustly, but no one believes it. Like it seems like almost across the board, no one believes it. There was a economist recently, a pretty progressive economist, I forget her name. She tweeted out some information on inflation and got lambasted left, right, and center because she was just pointing out that the economy is actually doing quite great. How do we get people over this hump of thinking it's all doom and gloom, right?
Really, my answer is just to wait, because I think that people get traumatized. Like, people have been traumatized, politically by other stuff. We had COVID, we had, a coup attempt, we had riots, we had 8 years of unbelievably hostile, political climate in America. I think people have been sort of traumatized by that into being pessimistic. And I think it's going to take people a while to get over that. And some of that they're going to get over. They might only get over a tiny bit of that by next year. What they will get over, I think, is the economic trauma of 2021, 22, because 2021 and 22, we had two things at the same time. We had this amazing, robust job market where basically everyone who wanted a job got a job, and we had inflation that was eroding the real purchasing power of pretty much everybody in the country, was having a much difficult time buying stuff. So those two things were happening at the same time. And when you see life getting more and more expensive and yourself getting poorer and poorer, well, of course you're pissed, right? But then that stopped, right? That only happened for like a year. And then, and that was bad, right? I don't blame people for getting upset about that. But then things turned around and started getting better. And inflation went down, and interest rates haven't gone down yet, but they eventually will if inflation stays low. And the job market stayed robust, and real wages started going up again, incomes, and then and wealth as well has done quite well. And so I think you just have to wait. I think you have to wait a year and see if people. I think it takes people a little amount of time to realize that things are better than they thought. Already we can see the consumer confidence numbers and various polls about the economy starting to creep up.
The problem I have with that, however, is in a vacuum, I think you're correct. If all it was is they were just looking at their pocketbooks, looking at their purchasing power, and seeing how it went forward, then yes, over time, it would rise and it would be less of an issue and a concern. But the problem is we have active forces that are pushing the message that no, actually it's not getting better. So when you have that trauma, as you called it, from 2021, 22, and then you also have a pretty good propaganda machine just pushing, you're poor, you're suffering, everything's going bad, all at the same time. I don't know if just waiting and seeing. I just don't think it's going to work. Maybe I'm wrong though. Maybe I'm incorrect. But I think that
all right.
Yeah.
Two things. We have to wait, and we have to unleash this guy on Twitter named Will Stancil, who has decided to individually argue with every single no-name leftist on Twitter about whether the economy is good, and he's going to just argue with all of them individually, and then convince the world.
Noah Smith is drafting Will Stancil for White House correspondent, White House speaker.
Will Stancil, he's had an interesting evolution because for years his whole shtick was do something Twitter. It was this idea that we're not doing enough and we need to do more. And then I think at some point he just snapped and realized that when we do things, people don't actually give credit for the fact that we just did things. They're like, wait, I did something and nobody appreciated it. And then he I think this has produced a change in his outlook recently. But more to the point, I think that, the messaging problems of Democrats are, solved by messaging. Just go out there and say, when you had Reagan had this Morning in America ad in 1984. You guys may know about this. I don't know if you're alive for it, but
I was one. But go on.
You were one. There you go. Yeah, almost Gen Xers. Let's
Hell
go.
Yeah.
The Zillennials. Anyway, so I'm too young to remember. I can't remember it. But the point is that It was like, it's morning in America. Inflation has come down and interest rates are low, so you can buy a house. And guess what? Interest rates were far higher then than they are now. Inflation was far higher then than it is now, right? Or even that it was in 2022. And so instead, what you need to do is tell people this. Just aggressive, active messaging. Just run some Morning in America ads. Run some ads that say, look how much inflation came down so that your purchasing power gets, preserved. Wages are rising, income too. The value of stocks and bonds and houses is going up. All this stuff, right? Like there's all this strong stuff. In fact, I'm going to write a post in a couple days about the strength of the American economy. Those numbers you could give, you could say like, this is, generic person in a commercial. Generic person is now able to buy this and this, for much cheaper than last year or something like that. Obviously,
well, it wouldn't be much cheaper. We ain't in deflation yet, mister. but yeah.
Noah, can I add something onto
relative
that?
to their wage, because their wage is going up.
Yeah, you'd have to say relative.
Yeah, okay,
Can I add something onto
go
that really
ahead,
quickly,
and then
just
we'll get
'cause
to SocDoneLeft. I promise you, SocDone, you'll get your turn. I promise.
This will just be super quickly, just because I happen to know a lot about this. I agree with you that we got to get that message out there. I think a unique problem that Democrats have right now is television ads are losing their salience. One of the things I'm really fighting for this election is Democrats traditionally, like in the last one, I think it was a $1.2 billion election. We spent half of that on television ads. Fewer and fewer people are watching television. And when it comes to online ads, there's really spotty data if they work. One of the really biggest things that we found that does have salience in modern American politics are things like relational organizing. So, I think one of the reasons why my own work has moved so far away
just
from
define
ads,
that for my audience, just real quick.
Please.
Relational
organizing. So the idea is this year when we are voting, let's say I reach out to Noah, I reach out to Whick, I reach out to SDL, and I go, hey, it's election day. Just make sure you're going out there. Here's some information about Joe Biden. What we do is we basically, we're very active in getting people social media, building those connections on social media, and in some cases just paying people to go talk to 200 of their friends and reminding them to go out and vote. This has been a wildly successful tactic. So I agree with the solution you're proposing, Noah. I think the implementation is so much harder in 2024 because all the parts of the old playbook are losing salience very quickly.
You can respond to that if you want, Noah, then we'll go to SocDoneLeft.
Yeah, I know. I don't know. Like, I don't know how to get messaging out there. I know, I wrote this piece lately about how, we used to have the government go out there and make what we now call propaganda, but really it was just the government explaining its viewpoint. The Roosevelt administration. Don't Be a Sucker was this famous film where they said like, America, where people of all races can get along together and blah 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 blah. I mean, that wasn't true, but it was explaining sort of the Roosevelt's vision for what America should be and of why the Nazis were bad, right? And so that was extremely powerful. They used the media at the time, which was the fact that there was no TV. People would just go to movie theaters every week, like 5 times a week, and just watch stuff in a movie theater like TV, right? And with their friends, and that was how people would consume product and information. And so that's what they did, right? They made those movies and they did the radio stuff, fireside chats and whatever. And now there's TikTok, there's Twitter, blah blah blah. You've got to get on that. I mean, obviously we should make TikTok sell itself, but there's video stuff, there's YouTube. Look at where people are getting their information. Make some information, right? Like, don't rely on television ads. Call top influencers into the White House to help you understand how to do this, right? In Why We Fight was this famous series of documentaries during World War II explaining to America why we're in this war. We haven't done anything like that for like Ukraine, right? We're not in Ukraine. We're not in the Ukraine war. We're supporting Ukraine, but Why We Fight is basically like supporting Britain against the Nazis before we enter the war, right? It's Lend-Lease. It's even the same name on the bill. And so, we're doing that. We haven't explained to the public why we're doing that. And so we see, the government seeds the field to people like David Sachs, who just get up there and just spout Russian propaganda all day. And so instead, you need to have the Biden administration out there making this media. and we're like, oh no, propaganda, blah blah blah. Yes, it's make the propaganda. Everyone knows where it comes from. Like everyone knows the government made this film. It's not like it's secret. Just you want the government to explain what it's doing and why. And we used to do that. And for Why We Fight, they got this famous director named Frank Capra to direct that. Go get some, go get some like. I don't even know who the important influences are because I just write my little blog and pay attention to economics. But go get whoever that person is. Even hire Hassan Piker if you have to. I bet he'll change his tune once you invite him to the White House. I bet he would switch his tune once you invite him to the White House.
With enough money and clout, okay, maybe.
I mean, he likes big houses and whatever, like fast cars and like.
I saw you had a little bit of a beef with him on Twitter recently. A little.
Well, I mean, not a beef. I'm not mad. Like I'm just saying, like obviously he has this idea that like America is evil, America does bad, this whole like anti-American attitude. And I'm like, look, the nation needs to know that this is what is prevalent on the left. And like I could argue with him and yell at him like, no, America good or something like that. But no, if I want to do that, I'll just write a blog post.
Fair enough.
I don't need to like have dunk wars. I'm just saying like, look, America, you need to know that is what is now prevalent on the left, because if you want to change that, then you've got to work to change that. And if you want to sort of be aware of what the leftists are about, that's got to be an important part of it, because that anti-Americanism has really come to dominate the left. I would say that even though the left, SDL's right when he says that the left is less virulently anti-American than it was in like the 70s. But they've dropped a lot of other issues, right? So anti-Americanism may not be quite as strong and virulent as it was, half a century ago on the far left. But the left is bigger now with the increase in DSA membership. But also the left has lost a lot of its animating economic ideas. I think that they really. And some of which were really just taken by Biden, and like,
I see you want to get in there, SocDoneLeft. I see you. Don't worry.
Yeah. So people need to know. People need to realize that anti-Americanism on the left is like a big deal. It's like become this animating force.
Before we get too far away from it, we were originally talking about inflation and how to affect consumers' like feelings about it. The consumer sentiment has trended upwards. Noah's correct. I do broadly agree the economy is better than it was. I think that the main thing holding it back is that we experienced an inflation shock, whereas most past experiences of inflation were an inflation like, I don't know quite what to call the opposite of a shock, but like a slow trend over time. Like even during the 70s and 80s, it wasn't like the oil price crisis hit and then boom, inflation went up to like 8% in like 1 year, which is what it did here, right? Inflation hit for some goods like 10, 20, 30%. And I think that's part of what shocks is the shock is that you if you were an adult in America, you lived 20 years with inflation of 2 to 3%, and then boom, 1 year prices go up 20, 30, 40%. And then the next year, you're comparing prices based to what it was 2 years ago. In contrast, if you were in the 70s, 80s, 90s, you might have been used to a higher inflation rate and less like just thinking about the sticker shock. So that's sort of my bet. That's my bet as to why it's different than all the times this happened before. But as far as I'm aware, we don't know. Like there's no firm data proving why consumers think the economy is worse than quote unquote you think it like objectively is. I do know that there is also like, whatever. I guess, okay, moving to like the anti-Americanism stuff, all I would just say is that I think it's a real problem. I think it's worth critiquing. At the same time, I do also think that like, so I've sparred with Noah on the other side. I think that if Hassan is a like anti-America campist or whatever, or a slight pro-China campist, I think conversely you lean like too pro-United States. And obviously I'm a socialist. You're like, you are, I believe you're self-described neoliberal. I forget if that's not true anymore. But regardless, I were very much.
No, that was a joke. That the neoliberal thing was a joke. I've always been a big advocate of like industrial policy and other things that neoliberals hate.
Okay. As like a center leftist or whatever, I worry that stuff like just supporting US in the trade war against China, I felt like that was a real mistake. Like there's another world in which the US and China grow closer together, and there's a greater likelihood of like cooperation potentially leading to the next leader of China not being like anti-America and seeing us as like a hegemonic threat the way that Stalin did or the way that Xi seems to, but instead his successor being like a pro-America or not pro-America, like an America neutral liberalizer, for example.
Let's talk about that. before we get too far away from that, I do want to talk about that. Recently, I believe Biden and Xi met. What was it, yesterday? Maybe the day before. Had a talk, right? I'm not sure what's going to come out of it. I don't know, right? Like China lies all the time. But I
Sure.
want to ask, right? Like, how realistic is China and America coming closer together? Because everything I see shows the opposite. Shows them kind of diverging and it being more and more hostile. And this is for the past few years, at least. So how realistic is a kind of a reemergence of cooperation between these two countries? What do we think?
I mean, I know that recently there was a somewhat memed on meeting where Xi came. I think Xi came to Washington, or there was a meeting anyway between Biden and Xi, and Xi was slightly got miffed because Biden like complimented his wife too much. And it was funny about that, but whatever. It seemed like they had a mostly nice meeting, wife issues aside. And so like so I'm generally in favor of that. Like I do not like the idea that the US should try and maintain a hegemonic like role through a combination of soft and hard power, because I think that tends to create cycles of like other countries fighting back with soft power. Like China would respond to a chip war by like shutting down on exports to America and doing things that would hurt the United States as well. And therefore, American workers and American people.
Bring it.
I just tend to think that like the most I actually tend to take the view that like some libertarians take that if there is greater economic integration between the US and China, there's more likelihood for the people of China and the leaders of China to be like pro-democracy. The number one reason that leaders of China are anti-democracy is they saw the collapse of the Soviet Union, they saw what happened afterwards, and they saw the US role in that, and they utterly despise that. They refuse to take their hands off the levers of power because they are so afraid of that. And, like, not trying to say they're just, I'm just trying to say they're autocrats who don't want to lose power in a democratic China. And if you show them that, hey, maybe you can maintain your power in a billionaire-dominated China, maybe there's a democratic road to China. Like,
yeah. What would be your response to that, Noah?
That's like, come on, that's like tweets from 1996, SDL. I'm gonna mail you back to 1996 now.
I mean, we didn't know what Xi Jinping was going to do before he came in, right? Because like it's so opaque at the high levels of the government. We didn't know he was going to be an autocratic like centralizer or anything. So I'm just
someone like that is going to come along.
Yeah,
always do. Like when the purpose of elections.
I'm pro democratizing China. That's the argument I'm giving.
Yeah, but But the point is that the purpose of elections is that you don't get one guy who's able to dominate like that permanently, who's able to come in, because if there is one guy who dominates a party completely, like Trump has done to the Republican Party, or whatever, he gets kicked out when his party gets kicked out, right? And so that's what couldn't happen in China because of the autocratic system, and that's the mistake that Deng Xiaoping made. Although Deng Xiaoping did many, many, many things right, he did not do this one right. And he handpicked two successors who did a good job after him, Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao. And then the party was taken over by a guy who's just really good at putting his cronies in positions of power and internal political maneuvering. Who could have predicted that would happen? And the point, like...
So that
happens with every one-party system ever made.
I am extremely pro-democracy. Like I've written, I wrote, I think the longest article that I've ever seen on North Korean democracy, the lack thereof, like entirely based on North Korean sources being like, no, of course it doesn't fucking exist, you moron. However, the argument I'm trying to give is that like, if you want a democratic China, like what world is more likely to achieve that? And I think that a world in which the US and China are openly sparring is a world in which nationalist elements, which tend to be the conservative, anti-democratic elements of the CPC, are more likely to rise to the top, for example. Like, and in addition to that, I think that a trade war between China and the United States, and even possibility of increasingly hard wars between the United States and China, I think all of that tends to make the world a less safe place for like average people, a less safe world for democracies in the third world. There might be more coups if we have a Cold War 2.0, right?
Hey, I think I both agree and disagree with you. Like, I think that one of the really key tenets for stability is mutually entangled interests, and I think the degree to which we, like, I think one of the main reasons we've not had a World War III has been the globalization and the economy post Bretton Woods has led to a lot of interdependence between countries that has forced the United States and China to get along, when I think without those entangled interests, I think it could have gone a lot worse. I do want to say, I think you're really minimizing the degree to which China has been hostile to the United States, has enabled some of the worst people in the world, including Putin and Ukraine. I think he's directly, that's their biggest trading partner. And there's a reason that Joe Biden has been talking about this pivot to Asia. With our State Department policy for a long time. I think it's really under-discussed here in the United States that Joe Biden came into office with a huge economic policy he wanted to get done, and Ukraine and Vladimir Putin really sent that off course. Now this Israel and Hamas war is sending it even further off course. So I think it's really unfortunate, because I do think we need a serious national security response to China. I think we need an honest conversation about currency manipulation and trade balance. But I think you're really underselling the degree to which China has been extremely difficult to work with.
I mean, that's so. I am not trying to say that Xi Jinping under China has been like a pro-America, please integrate, please trade with us as much as possible, like America stan or whatever. Very much the opposite, right? He's intentionally flamed the fans of nationalism. I believe in a speech a year or two ago, he openly talked about taking back Taiwan through military force, for example. Like, I'm not trying to say that he is some easy person to work with. However, neither was like Mao, right? Neither was like the early leaders. And yet economic integration probably built a safer world where like China wasn't as openly militaristic, where China was less authoritarian. Even today under Xi, it's better than it was under back then.
Yeah. My question though, to you, SocDoneLeft, is given that Xi is so hostile and they have engaged in such, I want to say like technological espionage and warfare against us, like no shit, right? Like just straight up stealing our shit. Do we just let that go, let that slide? Should we not respond? Like you like this integration, well and good, but how practical is that to do it while this other nation is literally adversarially poking at you? I'd even go so far to say is attacking, right, economically and such, right? How realistic is it for any president, be it Biden or anyone, to just be like, well, okay, I guess we're gonna just take our lumps and just be friends? I just don't see that happening.
I mean, I think that U.S. politicians, like, there's a reason, this will sound off topic, but there's a reason that U.S. requires so much stuff to be built with U.S. steel, right? One of the most populist, quote unquote, things that Biden did was like a shift back towards everything has to be built using U.S. steel. There's always a appetite for nationalism in the U.S., just as there is in China. I think that's part of the things that's driving Xi towards like this antagonistic approach. His economy is slowing down. Like a lot of things which drove the popularity of the Chinese Communist Party was basically their argument was, we will give you economic growth, but we won't give you freedom. And without the economic growth, that argument falls apart. So instead, you give them something else: nationalism, a totem of like, greater China, right? You see this all over the world, right? There's a reason that nationalist movements emerge during depressions. There's a reason they emerge in hard times. So I think that's part of what's happening. And I don't expect, of course, like an American leader just to be like, yes, I will take this and give no lumps back. The argument I'm trying to give is like from an optimal, like from my ideological or like humanitarian worldview or whatever, what world is most likely to be best for most people. And if you want democratization of China, if you want like a non-Cold War II proper over like the third world or whatever, I think it's better to have the fight remain in soft power competition between the US and China. It's best not to escalate it in a way where either side would consider using hard power. That's like, okay. So far, China hasn't invaded any country in, I think, like 40, 50 years. I would prefer to keep it that way.
What was the last country they invaded?
Vietnam, because of extremely dumb shit. Yeah.
Unlike our shit, which was quite smart when we did.
Yeah. All of our wars completely intelligent, very smart. Yeah.
Okay, so let me respond to what SDL said right there, which is that I would love it if we never had a war and all competition was in the form of soft power. That's what we want. That's the future we want. But America does not simply have a lever that says peace and war, and we're the ones who get to pull that lever. The idea that America is omnipotent, that we're the only ones with agency that is a brain disease that we got during the 90s and the 2000s, right? That is this unipolar hyperpower moment, blah, blah, blah. The thing we have to understand is that American hegemony is no longer a choice. It is done. It is gone.
Sure.
It is out. America is not a hegemon. And no matter how much we sit there and want to be a hegemon and say, please give me back my hegemony for my birthday, I've been a very good boy, it will not happen. It is impossible now. It is not possible. It is, sir, not appearing in this film. And American hegemony is done. And we must now deal with a world in which we are not a hegemon. We're just one of a number of contesting powers, trying to create a more stable world, trying to promote our interests, trying to do all these hard things in a world where we don't just get to pull the levers and say, here's what happens and here's what won't happen. Here's whether we'll go to war and here's whether we won't. China gets a vote. If Xi Jinping wants to go to war, war will be gone too.
That's right.
So in this post-Pax Americana world, right, that you were saying that we live in, Noah, what is America to do, right? What do you foresee America's foreign policy in the next 10, 20 years? What should we be advocating for? What should Biden be? Brianna Wu mentioned the Asian pivot. Is that a good idea? Should we be focusing more on, as the Republicans might want, isolationist kind of policies? Where do we go from here?
I'm very glad you asked. All right, so the first thing we need to do, Brianna's absolutely right that we need to do the Asia pivot. Middle East is a realm in which not only has our power done a lot of bad stuff within the last, couple decades, Iraq War and whatnot, some good stuff, a little bit of good stuff, a lot of bad stuff. And so we screwed our reputation there. But also it's an extraordinarily brutal region run by autocracies. And, when it's a choice between Netanyahu and Hamas, it's not necessarily, we're not going to do a lot of good by throwing our weight around in that conflict. All right. Or a Cold War between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Who are the good guys there, right? I mean, obviously, there's no real good guys in international relations and war, and I know that, and we all know that. But the point is that it's like you can't even with a straight face pretend that one of those guys is good. All right, and so don't get involved in Middle East conflicts. Like extract from the Middle East and use our power in Asia, because in Asia our power has been not always used for positive things. But our power has been crucial to the creation of this incredibly prosperous region that has grown and grown and grown, including China, whose growth we absolutely promoted with most favored nation, permanent normal trading relations, the WTO, and all kinds of other stuff that we did for China to promote its growth. And the stability that our power provided has just absolutely enriched Asia, and that's why when you look
what
at
does that look like
of countries in Asia,
you
see they all want us there. They all,
Yeah.
Indonesia is signing a comprehensive strategic partnership. Vietnam, we just sent, we just had the president, go to Vietnam and shake the hand of the Vietnamese leader under a giant portrait of Ho Chi Minh. That happened. Vietnam's our ally now. So our power is better applied to Asia. And we need to focus on alliances, and we need to focus on helping countries defend themselves and build up a defense, like Ukraine, build up a defense so that they can't get conquered by their neighbors, so that no one tries to conquer anybody, so that we can have a world where soft power reigns and peace rules. And that is our best chance for promoting a world of peace, which is what we want, is just to make it so that countries can't conquer other countries.
But you understand how at least pivoting away from the Middle East right now would be seen by some as an abandonment either of Israel or of Hamas, right? Or not Hamas, Palestine, sorry. Of Palestinians.
I understand that, yeah.
Yeah, and so like I asked to SocDoneLeft, how do we get there from here? Do you think that's a really realistic, at least in the short term thing that we can actually do? Because again, right or wrong, we're in the Israel and Palestinian conflict right now. We are kind of we're balls deep.
What degree?
Pardon the phrase, huh?
What degree?
Well, how much fund Israel?
America's funding to Israel is I think 16% of Israel's defense budget. If we cut off all of that funding tomorrow, obviously it would provoke a lot of screaming. However, it wouldn't actually materially impact Israel's defense very much. Anyway. I know
No,
we're
sorry.
not going to
Can
do
I?
that.
Can
Right? I
I?
know we're not going to do
Can
that.
I know that we have been secretly giving them weapons over the past few months. The Intercept reported there was a leaked document, and you can say maybe it's not true, but there was a leaked document that like there have been, I want to say, like 57,000 rounds of shells exported to Israel. Sort of the same thing as Ukraine. Like if they run out of shells, they can't really do their war. They can't really do their bombing if they run out of missiles. So I think there's a pretty direct route there that like the U.S. has a lot of power, and I will note that like there's a lot of anecdotes of this. Like Reagan called the prime minister of Israel when he invaded Lebanon, and he told him to stop the bombing, and it happened like within hours, within minutes. I do just want to note, like, while all this is happening, there are like hundreds of people dying a day in not or close to in Palestine, and like I do actually think that like supporting Israel is to some degree an abandonment of Palestinians. That like for years and years and years and years, it's been the position that the West Bank settlement is illegal and like basically like a form of ethnic cleansing. And like we placed no sanctions on Israel. We gave them, if anything, like the opposite. Right? They received the most military funding of any country on earth that the U.S. provides, except Ukraine right now, and that's only true for the last 2 years. So, yeah.
I think that's fair. I also think that it's underreported with a lot of these quote unquote weapon like things, particularly with Ukraine. We're very often it's very expensive for us to keep our national stockpiles. The United States has a lot of equipment that we're actually deprecating. A non-trivial number of the weapons that we've given to Ukraine are things that we were going to deprecate and get rid of anyway, and it actually ended up saving money, finding a legitimate national security use for that and getting it over there. So I think that's under discussed. I also just want to clarify, when I say pivot to Asia in the State Department's plan when Biden was coming in, that doesn't mean that America wasn't going to have an ambassador to Great Britain. It doesn't mean that we are going to live, Israel to their own fate and abandon them. It just means, unfortunately, every single presidential administration has priorities, right? There are things you spend more capital on and things that you spend less capital on. When Biden has to spend so much of his first few years of his presidency dealing with Vladimir Putin and the Ukraine situation, I think it's really clear that took away from the domestic agenda. So all I'm saying is that when Biden came in, when it came to our foreign policy, rather than spending so much effort focusing on the Middle East, he wanted to spend more of that looking at Asia, particularly economically, and I think that would have been the right call. Coming back, I just want to make a really, really important point that I think is really under-discussed when it comes to isolationism. And that is, Noah is dead on when he says, America's not a hegemony in the world anymore. We're in many ways a tripolar world order. And, China definitely has a say. One of the reasons that Vladimir Putin is so insistent and China is so insistent, just to go back and do a callback here, in like working through the TikTok to basically convince us that withdrawing from the world is in our best interest, or Vladimir Putin trying to get Trump elected because he's going to make us withdraw from NATO and withdraw from the world, is they love it. They love it. They love it when America withdraws from world foreign policy, because despite all of our failures, of which are many, I had friends die in Iraq, which is the thing that radicalized me more than anything else in politics. As effed up as our foreign policy has been at times, you have to ask yourself what will happen in this region when Vladimir Putin can rush in and China can rush in. Because that is literally the choice. It creates a power vacuum. And I think this is why, the America I really want to work towards in my own politics, my own career, is I want presidential candidates and I want a Congress that believes in strategic engagement. I want a Congress that believes in diplomacy and trade agreements and working with other countries. I want us to be the honest broker that we say that we are when it comes to peace between Hamas and Israel. I know we've fallen far short of that. I know that Iraq particularly devastated our credibility there, but I do think genuinely America at our best is probably the best of your options for providing that.
Well, let's talk about that.
And that's what I want to move towards.
Let's talk about that, right? Because I'm
Sure.
curious, because we mentioned what Biden should do, but there is no guarantee that Biden will be our next president, unfortunately.
Right.
So I'm just curious, regardless of what we think should happen or should be done, and I want to start with you, SocDoneLeft, and I want to go to Noah, and then I want to go last to you, Woo. Trump wins in 2024. Where do you see the U.S. foreign policy going? What do you think happens? Best guess.
I mean, in the Middle East, there's probably a return to more bombing. Trump was way more willing to do a rapprochement with Russia. So anything that we do in Syria or Iraq is probably way scaled down to give more room for Russia to operate. Same happens in Ukraine. All funding to Ukraine probably gets cut off. We give all of that funding instead to Israel, if it's still going on after a year, to continue more aggressively their war in Gaza. There's like every single Republican candidate, like not just Trump, but every single one has called for stuff to the tune of let Israel finish the job, that like there's universal opposition to a ceasefire. Trump said that any drop spilled of American blood should lead to a gallon spilled of the enemy's blood. So I'm just like, the rhetoric here is pretty clear. They might actually use U.S. troops to help flatten Gaza in a Republican world. But more broadly, I don't know what the Asia pivot would look like. Probably a return to a hard trade war, which is what happened when Trump was back in power. So pull out of Ukraine, give all the missiles instead to Israel to bomb Gaza, and place sanctions on North Korea, and trade war with China. So all the things which I think would make the society less likely to open up.
Okay. What do you think, Noah? Is that a fair read, or is SocDoneLeft is mind? I don't know.
That was terrible.
I'm not a comedian.
That was 10
Don't judge me. I'm feeling to the normie
It's sucked on wrong. Oh my god.
I don't care. Okay, go ahead.
I love it.
I don't need this criticism. I will destroy you all. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, about right. I mean, Trump is. I view Trump fundamentally as a chaos agent. I think that his second term would be both more fascistic and more mercurial than we expect. Fascistic because the same people who did the January 6th coup attempt would now be in the driver's seat, and most of the actual, stuff they try to do would be cracking down to domestic enemies, sending people they don't like to jail, destroying the, or repurposing the American security state to spy on people and to like throw everyone they don't like in prison and all this stuff, right? That's what they're going to focus on. Foreign policy would be primarily an afterthought to them. In the first term, Trump tried to govern as like a president. I think in the second term, he tried to govern like the leader of a junta. And so I think that foreign policy would be an afterthought and determined chaotically and randomly, compared to domestic policy, which would be a systematic attempt to persecute Trump's perceived domestic enemies, abetted by the worst people he could possibly put in government. So that's my prediction.
You know what? I'm feeling so optimistic now. Woo, what you got?
No, I share everyone's assessment here. I think democracy is very much on the table. I certainly had my differences with Mitt Romney in 2012, but I've never doubted that the man loves this country and is committed to democracy. There are a lot of reasons to be scared of a Trump second term. I think the biggest one is he seems to admire these authoritarians that are all around the world. And I think that if he comes back into power, he's going to use that power to get vengeance on his enemies. So that's why, I had a talk with Dino Badala over on Sirius XM earlier this week, and he really made me realize that I think it's really important that we try to bring our party more together and try to focus our efforts more on basically understanding this threat and trying to pick the best policy option that we have, because maybe this is hyperbolic. Y'all can tell me if you think it's too strong. I don't think the fabric of American democracy can survive a second Trump term. I just don't. I think we barely made it out the first time around, and I don't think we can again.
It would be tough.
Yeah. I guess for the last question I'll ask you all. I put you all in a room together. I've read a lot of Noah. you've written on both of these characters here, both Brianna Wu and SocDoneLeft. And now that you were all in a room together, right, I just want to see if you had anything that you wanted to ask each other or talk to each other about. I know SocDoneLeft had some issues with how you've characterized him, and I'm curious.
What?
As an advocate, I believe you were. Was I wrong? We were in a call together, and you were like, I can't believe he called me this."
Oh, it's just because he used it was like a funny phrase or something. He called me like a grassroots activist socialist or something. And I'm like, yes. I tweet. There's no grass in my room. I don't touch that.
So, but yeah, now that you're all together, all here, again, all influencers in your various spheres, is there anything you wanted to talk to each other about that perhaps I'm not aware of or didn't, know about?
I admire both of my co-panelists. So I think my respect for your work, I think that comes through clearly. SDL, I'm not entirely sure how forthcoming you're being with your opinions. I sometimes gotta be honest, I worry that you are being just super friendly and open, and you're kind of just trying to trick America down the dark socialist path. Maybe I'm wrong about that because we have so many of the same friends. But I respect the way you engage. I think it's respectful, it's open, it's honest, and I like that a lot. So I don't really have any criticism for either of you.
Fair enough. Well, it doesn't have to be criticism; it could be questions. But go ahead, SocDoneLeft. You had something to say.
Well, I am tricking America down the dark path of socialism, but I'm doing it with honesty and clarity.
Sure.
I guess, I raised a major criticism. I think that I've openly talked with Noah about this on Twitter before, that I think that the hostile approach to China, and in general, the hostile approach to like a lot of closed off regimes is generally a bad one. That like in North Korea policy, it's often framed as like sunshine policy versus like the hostile policy of the current administration. And I'm not sure that like closing off, trying to shut down economic routes, like actually benefits either the people in Korea, if they're going to remain under an autocratic government, for example. I'd rather they live in a government where at least they have enough food to survive or whatever. But two, I'm not sure it like actually leads to a more likelihood of democratic leadership in the future. So I generally take the view that I don't know that sanctions have a great track record of displacing authoritarian states. The only times it's ever seemed to have like any efficacy are places like South Africa, where there was a huge domestic movement already to overturn apartheid, and South Africa was like a US client state. So like I don't know. I'm pretty skeptical, I guess, of that sort of hostile approach, which is a policy disagreement that we've already hashed out over this show. But
enough. Anything from you, Noah?
Well, let me ask you, SDL, real quick. What do you think about the U.S. effort to support Ukraine's defense against invasion? Sorry.
Yes.
I mean, I have completely supported it. I do know that recently, so I got a lot of trouble because I'm not sure that at this point supplying offensive weapons benefits Ukrainians, because I'm not sure they can, like, bluntly, I'm not sure that they can make further territorial gains. I know secretly the US has started negotiations to try and bring a peace in Ukraine, so I'm not sure they believe so either. And they probably have better military intelligence than I do, since they've been killing so many Russian generals with it.
Hey, no. I don't want to ask for every single opinion you have in Ukraine.
Sorry. Yeah.
Were we right to do what we did? And
absolutely.
The Ukrainians to defend themselves.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay. Next question. Would we be right to do the same thing for Taiwan?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that...
No further questions, Your Honor.
I think that the key principle here, and I want to bring back to, again, something that's going on right now, is democratic self-rule. Insofar as Russia came in, stormed in, and overturned more or less what was democratic rule. I think it's questionable in Crimea. It's possible in a fair election a majority would have voted to join Russia, but it wasn't a fair and free election, so like they didn't give a shit about that anyway. But it's possible a majority would have joined in Crimea. Absolutely not in the Donbass. It was like 70-80% opposed, and yet they all, quote-unquote, voted to join Russia over there. But the broader principle is democratic self-rule. Taiwan getting invaded is not like them doing a democratic decision to join up with China or whatever. And Palestine being permanently occupied by Israel and bombed is not like local democratic rule or whatever. Absolutely not. So I think that the key here, the reason why I constantly talk about like Palestine, not constantly, why I think Palestinian liberation is so key, for example, is because it is trying to uphold that principle of democratic self-rule. The same reason I support Ukraine is the same reason I support Palestine.
Okay. Well, how about
Fair
this?
enough, yeah.
How about this? I have some super chats to read, and I'll go through them. And a few of
I
them
do have a
questions.
couple of questions I could throw at Noah if you wanted me to, but you can do the super chats first.
Sure. And while I'm doing the super chats, and we'll get to Woo's questions after. But gang, if you want to ask a question of the panelists directly, you can join the Discord and do that. Type !Discord in chat. Click the link, accept the rules, pull you on. We'll take a couple questions. We won't keep you here too long. I know people have things to do, places to go, things like that. But I do want to give my audience a chance to come on and maybe grill you all a little bit, if that's okay. Is that everyone good with that? Everyone cool?
Let's do it.
Okay. Let me get to these super chats.
Grill me.
Okay, here we go. Adarius for $5. Bitches be less capable. Thank you for that $5. Okay. Adarius also for $5. Should we be allowed to read what he wrote? Assume this was back in the Osama bin Laden. Should people be allowed to read Osama bin Laden's letter? Is this where the limit is to freedom of speech and expression?
I have very strong opinions on this. Can I answer this?
I've read it. Yeah.
Yeah. So look, the entire problem here, in my view, that I stated is that the American people never had an honest conversation about why bin Laden attacked us. And look, I support Israel. You can see my comments on Twitter. I've gotten in the shitter with leftist Twitter constantly over the last month over my support of Israel. But it is true that part of why bin Laden attacked us on 9/11 was America's decision to support Israel, right? So I think, Whick, this is where it taps into, I think, the mission of your show, that we don't need to close down speech. We need more sophisticated speech, and I think we need a more sophisticated discussion with the American people about our foreign policy. This is why I think it's so important. We need to have the discussion that we need to have and not the discussion China wants us to have. So the answer is definitely not to censor this, and The Guardian was dead wrong to take that down. We should be doubling down on talking through that, analyzing why it was wrong, giving people a history lesson, because there's literally 2 generations of Americans that do not have a functional understanding of national security, in my view.
Fair enough. Any other thoughts on that one?
Also, remember that The Guardian is a private British newspaper and is even sillier than your average private British newspaper, which is very difficult to achieve. And so very silly British newspapers should not be taken as the official sort of policy stance of the United States government or society at all.
Very silly British newspapers. Fair enough. $2 from Cryborn, Base, Noah, and Brianna. Well, thank you. Sorry, SocDoneLeft, you didn't get included in that. Cryborn for $10 more. Great panel. Noah, I heard about your blog after Whick said you were coming on. Any favorite pieces of yours I should check out?
Depends on what you like. I wrote a piece about why I like to take care of rabbits, which I think is a very good piece. If you read the Why Rabbits piece, that was pretty good.
Why rabbits?
Otherwise, it just depends on what you're interested in. I write a lot of stuff about economics. Recently, I've written some stuff about geopolitics. I should probably get back to economics a little bit. Yeah, just scroll through, see what you like.
Okay, and $5 from Allison. Lovely discussion, no notes. And I appreciate all the super chats. Thank you for that. There was a few on the Twitch side as well. Not super chats, but bits. Let me get to those. I gotta scroll up. Unfortunately, Twitch doesn't have as easy a time checking these things as YouTube does, but we'll get to it. Oh, you guys are chatty. Okay, while I find those, Woo, why don't you ask your questions?
So, I was really frustrated today to realize my subscription to your Substack had run out, so I resubscribed. And in preparing for this panel, I read a bunch of your pieces. I was there was one in particular I really enjoyed, which was talking about this idea of progressive dystopias, where we might actually, with the best of intentions, I think, be pursuing policy directives that are not good, right? And I was just wondering if you could tell people a little bit about that. Like, what is your idea of a progressive dystopia, like a theoretical one?
All right, well, this came out of an argument I had with my podcast co-host, Brad Long, professor at University of Berkeley, University of California, Berkeley, where he said that basically he characterized. Brianna, we were talking about you. He was talking about.
I listened to the podcast. I have some contentions with your co-author, your co-host,
well,
not you.
I hadn't read your thing, so I was unable to speak about it. But I think that the idea is that criticisms of the left are typically by center leftists. Criticism of leftists by center leftists are usually couched in terms of criticism of tactics. It's like, stop saying defund the police, instead say this other slogan that works better, or stop, etc. Stop saying from the river to the sea, instead, like, use better tactics to achieve the desired ends, but the desired ends are basically good. And I was saying, okay, well, sometimes that is true, but sometimes the desired ends of some progressives are actually bad in some ways. Like, progressives don't have a monopoly on, like, being right about things. They do better than the other side, but they don't have a monopoly on being right. And so I was trying to look at some progressive ideas that I think are not goals that we should be going for at all. So degrowth was the most obvious one. Like, this idea that, we could save the planet by impoverishing ourselves is basically dumb and wouldn't work. It wouldn't work because once you reduce people's material standard of living, once you impoverish them, they're like, give me the fossil fuels. I just want the fossil fuels. And then you're, so also there's various logistical problems with it and technical problems, but basically it would backfire. We need growth in order to produce green energy, which we need to decarbonize our economy. We need growth in order to relieve the poverty of the developing world, and blah, 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 blah. And so, and many people, Ezra Klein, Branko Milanovic, have also written about this stuff. So that was just one example of, like, a group of progressive people who are trying to take us in a direction that I think is actually a direction we don't want to go. We don't want to catch that car, right?
Yeah. I mean, and yes, SDL, I hope I can. I would love to have a panel of Whick with you sometime. Just kind of, it's not that I am capitalist as much as I am completely. I really thought through the socialism question. I've studied it. I've read what y'all have said. I've been to many DSA meetings while I was running for office. And I just, like, Noah, you're talking about bad policies. I think a lot of socialists have some really stupid policies that they're trying to move us towards. One of them that I just happen to know a lot about because I'm married to Frank, who played a part in bringing the COVID-19 vaccine to market and helped work on the lipid nanoparticle delivery system, is drug development, right? If you talk to if you talk to a lot of socialists, they just say, hey, we just need to do all drug development through the NIH. Government just does all of it and we're done. And if you really, really look at the way drug development works in this country, it tends to be like someone will have an idea, they'll do it at university, they'll spin off a company. You've got not big pharma, but these small-sized pharma companies working on it for a decade. Sometimes they're getting grants to do science. Sometimes they're just working with venture capitalists, and a lot of them fail. And, being in this, like, seeing this system firsthand, I think this is a really good example of something capitalism does actually better than I think, a socialist way of doing this would be. Because a socialist model would, it would be so politicized as far as trying to decide what drugs and what projects you were working on, rather than really objectively looking at the science and thinking about what the best bets to bring to market are. Because drug development is such an inherently, I don't want to say wasteful, but it's a very luck-driven process. So, I think this is a really good example of a poor policy direction for us to move towards.
I want to give you a chance to respond to that. You're being attacked directly, SocDoneLeft.
I'm saying I think he's wrong. I'm not attacking. I'm saying
no. So I wanted to get at two things. First was what Noah Smith was talking about with, like, maybe leading to bad slogans and whatnot. And so I very much find valuable to me a mantra from Harrington, one of the co-founders of DSA, that he was on the left wing of the possible, with the argument that there are certain quote unquote more left or far left views that are actually detrimental or not effective at moving policy leftward. So being on the left wing of the possible means that you are as left as possible within the current circumstance. So I maybe as a secondary point, I think that I've been persuaded to the view that a big part of the reason that bad slogans, bad like priorities tend to emerge is that a lot of left organizations are not democratically run and don't have to they basically don't have performance goals. They don't have to meet something or other. They're like a guy on Twitter whose only performance goal is how many likes he gets on a tweet. They are like a progressive donation magazine, and the only way that they get donations is by having the most radical slogan. And so there's actually perverse incentives by performative online spaces to come up with performatively radical but practically ineffective slogans. Conversely, DSA has adopted a lot of bad slogans. At the same time, I would just note it's also managed to win the largest number of socialists in Congress in US history. It's managed to win 300 electeds around the country. There's simultaneously a lot more meat to that project, and I think it's because it's a democratically driven organization, not like a donor driven radicalism based slogan based organization. And maybe then second, just to respond to what Brianna said about the pharmaceuticals, I do agree that a market of some kind, I consider myself a market socialist for, say, goods which near the end of the production process. There's usually considered in scientific process a spectrum from basic science, which is the very start of the pipeline, right? Trying to invent a new chemical, a new material, or testing how something works in vitro or versus in vivo. And at the end, you get something that's almost up to the production floor. You have something which can is almost ready to be put in the pill process. And that seems to do well with competitive firms. It's the basic research that socialists tend, at least to me, tend to have the strongest case for. And in fact, even SocDems have argued this. What's her face? The Entrepreneurial State, Mariana Mazzucato, very famous book that came out that argued that a lot of the basic research for stuff we use today, say GPS location and satellite communication, was a result of US funding for basic science, because private firms are really, 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 really bad at taking billion-dollar gambles, which will fail 9/10 of the time. But the government is very good at doing this because it has a shit ton of money and a very long time preference for how long it wants something to pay off in. So yeah, we can throw a lot of money in. There was recently, and maybe one last thing I would add to this, there was recently a paper, or I think it might just be a preprint, which noted that there is a huge spillover of public R&D, and that part of the reason there's been a productivity growth decline in the West broadly is literally because the US has stopped spending as much money on public R&D. Public R&D has gone down by 75% since the 60s and so. So I'm just even if you don't think it can all be public, at least we should be returning to SocDem level policies of really, really, really high public spending.
Can I ask a clarifying question? When you say market socialist, because
one second, and
yeah,
you can ask
ahead.
that question. But gang, I got 120 people watching me right now, and not one person wants to call in. Get backstage! Come on, let's get it going.
Come on.
Anyway, go ahead.
Do it. No, I was gonna say, because y'all use so many terms, and they're legitimately hard for me to understand sometimes. So forgive me if this is basic. When you say market socialist, my understanding of this is you believe in basically a halfway role for markets to play as a jumping off point to get us to total socialism. Is that not correct, or am I misunderstanding that?
Some people, like Lenin, literally thought of market socialism as a transitory state, that you have capitalism, then you do market socialism, and you sort of ramp up more nationalization, then you get real socialism. I tend to think that market socialism is actually more akin to the long-term outcome. I do think that, I think of markets as a tool that in a regulated context with something that market socialists call indicative planning, basically a lot of subsidies, taxation, and planning that's less direct than nationalization, can achieve direct, democratic control over the market. So we want democratic control in firms, democratic control of the market through subsidies and taxation, but we don't want nationalization of everything. A lot of things should be nationalized. I think there's a lot of arguments that single payer, single operator, fully nationalized healthcare seem to do fairly well in the countries it's been tried.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm on record. I want to move towards single payer healthcare, and I do think that we should have bulk negotiation of drug prices.
Can I make one really quick note? Single payer is Canada. Breckenridge is more of what I'm talking about. Breckenridge is Japan, UK. It's single payer and single operator. The government employs all the doctors too. That's all.
I hear what you're saying. And, I guess my biggest criticism with socialism, and this is where, coming back to Noah's blog, I think you're driving us towards some really bad policy outcomes, is I don't know everything about everything, but I do know quite a bit about drug development, just being married to Frank. And I think the more you know about the nuts and bolts about how drugs are improved, how they're brought to market, how they're researched, who's doing it, the less and less this kind of blanket statement you're making about let's just do more research through, the government funding it, like as a blanket. I think it just makes less sense the more you know. And I think that's where like we're moving towards some poor policy decisions. And that is increasingly like the mainstream position of the left is just nationalize all drug development. Like I hear that all the time. So I think that we need to be more open to more sophisticated conversations. And I think my biggest problem with trying to lead the left right now is everything is so instantly moralized. You're either a good person or a bad person that it's really hard to have like nuanced discussions about what our public policy should be.
Okay.
I'm just glad to hear two people on the left talking about policy, talking about economic policy instead of just saying like America is great, Satan her, bin Laden her. You know, like I'm just glad to hear people discuss substantive issues.
There we go.
Just like,
and if I may plug a little bit here, Whick TV is a cross-ideological platform where the left and right come together to have these discussions all the time. Just to plug that. So if you like this content, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Follow me if you're watching on Kick and YouTube, all that. Yeah. And again, all these people have all these comments in chat. Y'all are wilding in chat.
Cowards in chat. That's what I'm hearing.
Say it to my face.
Yeah, $2 from Fryborn, mostly based SDL. You got the mostly based. Okay.
Completely based. Can I? Do you have more to read? So, from just to respond a little bit, like Noah, I think part of the view of the left that you get, and I'm saying this slightly critically, is because your view is based a lot on like interactions you get on social media. It tends to be people who are incentivized to say the most extreme stuff, and like for the reasons that I sort of outlined earlier, I tend to think that what you see is as you move towards the spectrum, towards like people who actually get close to the levers of power, there's a much greater emphasis on stuff like unionization and winning elections and electoral policy. Like DSA was shouting from the rooftops that they won something that they like to talk up as a state level Green New Deal called the Build Public Renewables Act, which was incorporated into the New York State budget because of like 8 DSA legislators and a bunch of protests. And like stuff like that just doesn't get news coverage, nor does it get people like really mad at you on Twitter, because of course someone who's like shouting at you on Twitter for being too pro-America isn't gonna be like, and by the way, here's this really cool economic policy that I support or whatever. That's not getting them likes. That's not fun, right? So I think that what's fun, what's radical, what's edgy is very much like unproductive, performative, and that's true in all sectors. You see it on the right too, actually. But
well, look where it's driven the right, I would argue, right? Like, look where it's gotten them.
Not a good thing.
Yeah, $2 from 𝕵𝖎𝖎. Thoughts on From the River to the Sea?
Oh boy. I've got thoughts, but I've talked too much, so I will let Noah go.
Noah, what? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Noah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Brianna.
No, it's okay. Talk over Brianna. It's fine. Noah, what do you got? Thoughts on From the River to the Sea? Why is it never
from the sea to the river? It's like it's always like right to left. We got to change it from to American style, from the sea to the river.
Fair enough.
I don't know. Okay, look. Okay, what I'm saying is that from the river to the sea means that the current territories of Israel and Palestine should be united into one country. Nobody in the region who lives in that area actually wants to do that.
Yes.
And so it's not going to happen. It's like me telling like, oh, hey, Germany and France, you should both be part of the Carolingian Empire. And the Germany and France look over at me, they're like, no. And I'm just like, okay, no then. I mean, like those United States is not going to leverage its power to force a whole bunch of people who do not want to exist in the same country as each other to exist in the same country. It's not going to happen. We can't do that. We can't forge a nation out of people who do not want to have a nation with each other. If they do, fine. If they change their mind, fine. But they don't now. So the best we can do is like maybe try to keep them from killing each other too badly, maybe, or just ignore them. Like, it's like the it all comes back to this, like, this fantasy of United States omnipotence, the idea that we're this hegemonic power, can just pull the lever and make things happen and make let's make Japan and Korea into one country, or Japan and China. Let's make that into one country, right? Let's do that. I bet they'd want that, or Russia and Ukraine, you guys should just be one country. Remember when you were one country before? That worked so well. It was great. Who wants that? Raise your hand. And then, I mean, I guess
Russia kind of wants that. I mean,
yeah, no, good point. But the point is that like we can't just like wave our magic like America wand, Team America World Police / god wand and just make people want to have a country together. If they don't want to have a country together, we can't do it. It does not happen. So it will not happen. So saying from the river to the sea is pointless because like nothing like that is going to happen.
We got an actual caller, so I'm going. Callers. Now everyone comes in.
Can I respond to that
just
really quickly?
Briefly, yes, but then I do want to get to the callers. So yeah.
Yeah. No, I just want to say it's like I keep remembering when I was at Ole Miss, and one time the Gay Straight Alliance put their meeting right next to the Fellowship of Christian Athletes at the University of Mississippi, and there was a near riot. So, maybe sometimes two-state solution is the way to go.
I guess what I would just, as a final note, say is that from the river to the sea is partly an aspirational slogan for like people on the left who are saying it. Like they realize that right now there's not support for a one-state solution, nor in fact is there it's not actually really clear that a two-state solution is in the cards either. It would require the movement of 500,000 people from West Bank settlements out, right? If you wanted a two-state solution in the old borders, if you want to just incorporate them into the new Israel, which is what Israel wants, then you could have a two-state solution. But that obviously won't be acceptable to Palestinians. So I just want to say that we are really far, in part thanks to the activities of the Israeli right and the Palestinian right, really far from any solution. So I think the reason why people use the aspirational slogan is they don't just want two states based on two ethnicities, which hopefully won't tear each other apart. They want an egalitarian, plurinational state where everyone can exist as one. So I understand it's beyond the point, the current what we can do, but so everything is sort of out of the Overton window, and the point is to shift it.
Gotcha. Okay, let's bring in
the
caller.
That's fine. Go ahead and
have a party.
I hope for a one world state where everybody is part of the same happy world government. And
where's your article on world federalism, Noah? I need the world federalism article now.
Fine.
Now.
Go ahead.
Seven, welcome. You're live. You're muted on your end, not mine. You could do it. I believe in you. Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh no. So okay.
Are we waiting for me?
Yes.
Well,
you're live.
Yeah, it disconnected and reconnected like 3 times. I think it's interesting that we bring up the from the river to the sea thing right after talking about optics and latching on to saying the most radical thing and going for these solutions that are going to be ineffective. Because I think it's been so interesting to see Ethan Klein trying to explain to people why hearing from the river to the sea is so alienating and frightening to moderate Jews, and everyone being like, well, why the fuck should we care about that? Yeah. They're misinformed dumb fucks, or they're probably secretly Zionists anyway. So fuck that. They should just listen to our view of it or shut up. Why would we want those allies anyway? And those are the most important allies if you actually care about Palestine, and if you actually want the tensions in the West right now between Jews and Muslims to simmer down. So I'm just wondering why the left right now has this idea that to empathize with other people who disagree with you, even just enough to cynically understand where they're coming from, is so wrong.
I think that is so well said, and I couldn't agree more. I think one of the things that makes me good at my job is having grown up in such a red state and, worked for the Republicans, 20 years ago when I was much younger. I think it's really, people don't like to hear this, but democracy does not work where you eliminate your opponents and they stop existing and you get all the policy objectives that you want. It is compromise. It is figuring out, it's building coalitions. It's figuring out where you agree. And I feel like we miss this a lot. Just coming back to from the river to the sea part, what I think is just so notable, and Ethan said this, and I loved it and agreed with it, is it seems like over and over again in leftist politics, when someone who is marginalized is telling you that language hurts them, we tend to listen. I remember when you couldn't say fat anymore, you said person of size, and then fat activists said they wanted to be called fat again, and we moved back to that, right? And you do it because it's respectful. You do the same.
Uh-oh, they got her.
Wow.
CIA took her out. Unfortunately.
Oh, they'll come for you in the end, all of you.
We never deserved her anyway.
True. Go ahead.
While we're waiting for Brianna to come back, I guess the position I would take is I can understand why someone would be upset by the slogan because they feel that it has like an expulsion based nature to it. At the same time, I think that lots of left activists have explained that that is not their intent. And in fact, what I've heard people argue is if you are worried that this is an expulsion based slogan, and then a whole bunch of left activists come out of the woodwork and they're like, no, we explicitly mean this like egalitarian plurinational solution because we think that like there should be no difference between Jewish people and like Arab people. That should go the other direction of setting your heart at ease that like these people are not actually secret anti-Semites.
Wait, so if a bunch of people, just real quick, if a bunch of people came out waving the Confederate flag and then they were like, no, don't worry, it's heritage, not hate, right? You should, would that set your mind at ease? Should you feel a little more comfortable, right?
If they in other actions had shown that, like if they were members of the Young Patriots organization, an anti-racist like leftist organization which organized young Southerners in I think it was Chicago to like join unions and join anti-racist groups, yeah, maybe you might unironically believe them then. I think they still changed it from the Confederate flag because it's still a symbol of hate. But the point is that like if there's a person who's been spending 9/10 of the last year like fighting for BLM, anti-racism and whatnot, and then they come out and tell you, hey, and one more thing that I'm not racist about is Israelis versus Arabs. Then I think, yeah, it should be the other direction.
See, Brianna's back. The thing, and I want to let Seven go because Seven is our guest here, but like, I'll be straight. I don't believe a lot of them after seeing all the shit that everyone is saying, right? And all the TikTokers going about like, oh, Osama bin Laden's so based. Hitler should have ended you, right? Like, and finished the job. When I see countless amounts of these, I think, well, while I'll believe some of you, I'll believe most of you. Some of you are pretty sus still, so no, I don't believe you. Sorry, use a different thing. That's my thoughts. Seven, go ahead.
Well, here's the thing, like, if you're a Jewish person hearing this constantly thrown at you on social media or even in person just because calling a Jewish person a Zionist for not 100% agreeing with you on every single position is the go-to now. Having like not everyone is watching a long Hassan stream to be lectured at about why they're stupid to find that phrase offensive and upsetting. And yeah, it is difficult to believe when emotions are running so high and people are trying to shoot up Jewish schools and people are afraid for their children and their grandparents. And I just
Hassan
think
to have me on his stream, by the way. Anyone know? I
want
to go on Hassan's
I would
stream.
love to see that.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, I'm really sorry you're experiencing that. It's obviously dehumanizing, and I genuinely see that. Also, apologies. The reason I cut out is my lovely puppy Kaiju decided to chew through my Ethernet cable.
Oh,
Really?
While we were
cute
shooting.
name.
Yes. So Kaiju is struck again. I apologize. I'm going to be on phone for the rest of the show.
Is she paid by the FBI or the CIA?
Yeah. last question for you, Seven. Then we'll get to the next caller. And thank you for the bits, Feder Methodist. Appreciate it.
Okay. Oh, from me? I think
last question from you. Yeah, if you have one more thing to say, go ahead. If you don't, we can just...
I would just sort of conclude, like, again, I don't expect people who are deeply emotionally invested in Palestine right now to be like, oh, the poor Jewish people having a rough time on Twitter. I don't care about that. That's fine. It's just at least from a utility, like a pragmatic point of view. If this is upsetting and alienating people who would otherwise agree with you and support you, and this is driving hatred toward a lot of vulnerable people, can't you just say, yeah, we should phrase it differently? Like, can't there even be just a completely cynical level of understanding for what this is doing? I don't understand why not.
So I haven't seen any I haven't seen any polling on from the river to the sea. I know that a Jewish organization, which I have constantly promoted, Jewish Voice for Peace, has actually shouted the slogan at a lot of their rallies, and they are overwhelmingly of Jewish members. So I guess I just come from maybe a background where there's a lot of people in this left space who are very Jewish, often religious, secular, whatever, deeply Jewish, deeply tied up in it, who don't see any problem with the slogan. And so I guess to me, seeing all that, it seems to be someone should look at that and say, oh, if this group, which is nonstop fighting for peace, which is clearly made up of Jews, which is not trying to expel all Jews from Israel or whatever, that if this group can shout it, then maybe the slogan doesn't have an expulsionary intent to it. Or at least when groups like this are shouting it, they don't have that intent.
But you're asking people to have a very intellectual reaction to something that's very emotional and personal.
Okay.
Like, and I don't think that lecturing people about how they should feel about it is going to change the fact that this is destructive. I guarantee there are some people who were moderate that are being radicalized by this, genuinely,
100%.
especially the lack of care. That when you just try to explain, listen, this is shit that's been said to my grandparents because people wanted them dead. And you're like, well, actually, this group uses it in a very different way. It's like, okay, what does that do?
Okay.
What I would point to is even more moderate messaging of like DSA ran a campaign called No Money for Massacres, where they tried to encourage a ceasefire. And like there was a March for Israel held the other day where Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, and what's his face, Mike Johnson gave a speech talking about how we need to fully support Israel. And during that speech, the crowd started cheering "No ceasefire, no ceasefire," while people held up signs saying like "Let Israel finish the job."
When they say no ceasefire, you can't take that literally. It's just really a plea for peace. And see,
what I'm trying to
it's
say is that
aspirational that there's no ceasefire anymore because there's no more.
even the
They
ceasefire demand,
Israel surrender, Israel surrender. There's no need for a ceasefire. That's what they meant.
even the ceasefire demand is rejected by like centrist democratic elements, is all I'm trying to say. Like even centrist, like Keir Starmer is against the ceasefire. Emmanuel Macron is against the ceasefire. Like not a single, as far as I'm aware, centrist politician in Europe has supported a ceasefire.
Okay.
I just want to point to, just super briefly, Seven, if I could make every single person on the left read one thing, there was a piece in the New York Times that I was checking in with a Jewish friend of mine, a really close friend, how she was doing in the aftermath of this. And this is a New York Times piece. It's called "On Israel, Progressive Jews Feel Abandoned by Their Left-Wing Allies." And it's talking about people on the left who vote Democratic, who have sat there, they stood up for trans rights, for women's rights, they've marched on all these different things, they stood against the Muslim ban with Trump. And then when it comes to this, they see people who they perceived as their allies using language that really invokes some stuff that is personally scaring and very distancing for them. So I completely agree with your assessment. If we want better public policy on this, if we want to change course on this, there's no future for that doesn't involve like Jewish people in the Democratic Party being brought along with the answer. So I think you're really smart and really correct that just pragmatically, this isn't just the moral thing to do. It's the way to get what everybody wants.
Okay. Well, thank you, Seven, for calling in. We appreciate you. And we're going to send you to the void. Okay. We got one more caller. Hello.
Hey, Whick. Hey, another great panel. White Rabbits is a lovely blog post. Thank you, Noah. I was hoping to get the panel's thoughts on like the possible revivification of the Rust Belt and how it will affect American politics. Like, will the left, as it is now, resonate with them more than, say, an increasingly populist right?
I want to hear Noah's thoughts on this first, and then I want to get everyone else. You're muted on your end.
What was the question?
Would you mind repeating it, Crabborn?
Yeah, I was hoping to get your thoughts on like the possible revivification of the Rust Belt and how it will affect American politics, and like will the left resonate with that particular group more than an increasingly populist right?
Well, so with the Rust Belt, I think you're going to see positive effects from industrial policy for sure. But I think that there's a couple things that need to happen in order for that revivification to happen. I like that word, revivification. The first thing is YIMBYism. You need to have towns in the Midwest build a lot of housing and other things like solar power. And basically, as people moved out of the Rust Belt and property values fell, a lot of people turned to the same kind of NIMBYism that they've turned to in most regions of the country, which is to say, let's guard what property value I have left by making sure no one can move into the neighborhood and making our existing remaining neighborhoods very scarce, right? So the Rust Belt needs to build a lot of housing, and that needs to be a major movement. The second thing they need is immigration, because immigration, like, our country is not getting any younger; we're getting older, and a lot of the young people from the Midwest still, or from the Rust Belt, still want to move out to San Francisco or New York to be cool. I think remote work is going to help. I think that is a big tailwind for the Rust Belt, because now you can live in a cheap house in Pittsburgh or a cheap house in, I don't know, Milwaukee, and you can work and you can earn a good salary there and have low living costs. So I think that remote work is going to help a lot, and I think the industrial policy is going to help. But I think we're going to need more immigration, which Biden has been pretty good about. But we're going to need YIMBYism. We're going to need building a lot of housing in those places, and I think that's what it really crucially hangs on, because when you look at all over the world, places that build housing, are able to grow, and places that don't build housing are not able to grow.
Any other thoughts on this before?
Yeah, I guess one thing I would just add is active labor market policies. So Noah Smith talked about like industrial policy and remote working, but the US has a really, really lackluster job retraining program. Some of the better countries in Europe spend around 2% of GDP on ALMP, active labor market policy. We spend 0.1%, so 20 times less. And we've had a way greater deindustrialization than those countries did. And we've got this huge backlog of like 40, 50 years that we haven't been training for. So I think we need an enormous program for people who want to move, for people who want new job training that should be, to some degree, be public funded, let people get the job they want, especially as so many jobs are going to require college education and so many older workers don't have it. You need something that can bring them up to at least like a certification level. So,
I saw an analysis, SDL, recently that showed what a complete failure and a waste of money job retraining was after NAFTA. Basically, the gist of the argument is we would have been so much better off if we had just given those people straight money to help them find new jobs rather than trying to have a training program. So I'm unconvinced about the salience of that particular policy after seeing that analysis. I do think, obviously, as someone from the South, these are parts of the country that have been basically forfeited, and it's allowed, radicalism to grow in those parts of the country. There's desperation, and I think it's long been called for to, invest in more of a manufacturing base for the country. So, I would be very much in favor of a generational investment. I think the thing that gives me pause is seeing how the money in the CHIPS Act was specifically allocated. Because I think if you're actually in computer, like the tech world, and you know a thing or two about how fabs work and who has control over the patents and the tooling, I think if you look at this, you can see, I support the bill. I genuinely do. But in a lot of ways, this is a giveaway to the people that already have enough capital to build these kind of factories in the first place. So I think how we choose to invest in this really matters. And I think that's why tilting it towards policies that have green energy and renewable components to that, which increase our national security, that makes sense to me.
let me make one more point on this. Noah Smith just wrote an article about the U.S. needs a bigger bureaucracy. One of the arguments that I've often heard from a lot of people in DSA as well is that the farming out of a lot of stuff like active labor market policies to NGOs has been a catastrophic failure. The farming out of housing policy to NGOs has been a catastrophic failure. It would have been better to give people the money directly, or the left argument goes, it would have been better just to administer the program directly, because the NGOs are unaccountable. They aren't subject to a lot of market mechanisms. They don't function well either from a public perspective or a private perspective. So if you either just give them the money, try and let the market handle it, or just do it publicly and do it right. Because you can't trust, like the housing NGOs, and I want to say it's Los Angeles, have been so completely, they've spent their money on like advertisement instead of housing. It's been embarrassing. So that's all.
Any further thoughts from anyone else on this question?
I kind of have a follow-up question, if that's okay.
Briefly, because we do gotta wrap
up. When I'm typically interacting with like the far left, I'm not hearing about these kind of labor issues as much. It tends to be like some kind of social justice issue. I think it would, and I would hope you would agree. Like I think it would be more beneficial to bringing people to the left if we talked about labor issues more.
I think that's really dead on. One of the things I really appreciate about Congressman Ro Khanna, who I've gotten to know quite a bit over the last few years, is his core message is about economic patriotism, which involves investing in those labor issues in those parts of the country that we forfeited. I think it also really speaks to, how unionization in the labor movement has been one of the strongest stalwarts for, fighting for fair wages in the last few years. It's been tremendously rewarding to see that make a comeback. So I think a real challenge that some of my friends on the fringe left are going to have to deal with is, sometimes when you're talking to blue collar people, I met a lot of them running for Congress, and they're not people that talk about social justice issues and are up to date on all of the latest feminist language. So we've got to really develop more of a culture to, focus on what we agree on rather than enforcing the kind of enforcing these norms that they're important, but they can also pull us apart.
Okay. Well, thank you, Cryborn, for coming on. Really appreciate you. And you know what happens now. To the void. Okay, gang, this has been a wonderful discussion. I've enjoyed it immensely. I want to give everyone here a chance to shout themselves out briefly, and then we'll close shop. Gang, if you've liked this content, right, if you've enjoyed this show and you want to support the channel, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you're on Twitch or Kick, hit that follow button. Subs, gift subs, you can become a YouTube member. Super chats, all these things really help me keep the lights on. So I appreciate you, and thanks again. But we're going to give everyone here a chance to, again, briefly, where can they find you, what do you do, etc. We're going to start with Woo and get Noah last. So go ahead, Woo.
I think everyone knows where to find me. If you want to watch my show Rocket, you can do that over on Relay FM. Also, I'm starting a show with Counterpoints. It's going to start tomorrow night. Really looking forward to that. Just want to say one more time, Noah, really glad to have you here. And I hope you'll consider hanging around the streaming space a little bit more. I think we need more people that are very policy focused like you. And I think it's in your interest too, because I think it would translate directly to Substack subscriptions for you. The good thing about the streaming space is people are very used to directly supporting people that they like. So I hope this won't be your last time on WhickTV or around this space in general.
The
Sure,
tens of
and
dollars you can make from here. But no. SocDoneLeft, go ahead, give it a spiel.
Hey, I'm Aiden. I run the channel SocDoneLeft. I'm live over at SocDoneLeft.org/live. And yeah, I did really appreciate the conversation. It's always a pleasure to talk, Brianna. And first time I think we've talked in voice, Noah. But I really appreciated it. I think both of us are fairly reasonable, though you're completely wrong about China. My views are correct, and you should adopt them completely. Joking. But I did really appreciate it, and I think that it would be nice to have more sane voices instead of completely insane voices in the streaming space. So your center left one would be welcome.
Well, thank you for being here, gang. Check out SocDoneLeft. He's on Twitch, he's on YouTube, he's on his own things. You can find him wherever. And last but certainly not least, Noah, go ahead.
Hey, sorry about the bronchitis here.
You're forgiven.
Yeah, well, yeah, thanks a lot, folks. I mean, I don't know necessarily that I have anything else to say. Yeah, good chat, folks. Yeah, get me on Hassan's show if you want to see me debate him. I went on a bunch of streams actually a couple years ago, like Destiny, Vaush, 𝕵𝖎𝖎, and I don't know who's like popular now, but that was like just a few years ago, I think.
No, yeah, I saw you on both. I saw you on Destiny and Vaush both, and I really enjoyed your discussion with them. I could probably get you with them again, but if you want Hassan, gang, Hassan, okay, this is to you, Hassan. I know you're watching, okay? Hassan, you've been called out. Noah Smith wants to talk to you. He has some issues. You're going to hash it out on stream. So get in touch with him, okay? We're going to tweet this out right after the show. Gang, thank you again for going, and I'm going to let all these wonderful individuals go. I'm going to send you to the void, so bye-bye. Okay, send them all there. Gang, what do we got coming up tomorrow? Call-ins at 6 p.m. Eastern with Tuna Chip. It's going to be great. And then on Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern, we're going to have Jewish voices from across the political spectrum talk about Zionism. That should be fun. So that's what we got planned. That's what we got in the works. That's what we got coming up. I really, really hope you enjoyed the show. Again, once again, support the channel. All that. Where are we rating out? Where are we rating out? Let's go to Stardust. Yeah, Stardust? Let's go. Let's go. Okay, remember, this is a hate raid. Spam those emotes in chat, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye, bye, bye.